Place and Resources Overview Committee on Thursday, the 4th of June 2026. For the purpose of the meeting, my name is Councillor Ryan Hope. I'm the chair of this committee, representing the Western Ward in Weymouth. If I can ask all members and staff, please to turn your laptops to silent and mobile phones also if possible, just to avoid any interruption and to help audio in the chamber. As way as introduction, first committee with myself appointed to the chair. I plan to run these meetings very similar to how Councillor Canning did. I'll give every member of the, first of all, give the Cabinet member the opportunity to speak and introduce the paper before the officers, then invite non-committee members to speak, and then the committee will have a discussion, and we will try and formulate a joint resolution recommendation at the end of each item. Moving on to the agenda, item number 1 is apologies. Have any apologies been received, please?
We have apologies from Val Pothecary, Councillor Val Pothecary.
Thank you. Who's online? Yeah, thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 2, which will be proposed by myself and seconded by the Vice Chair. Minutes of the last meeting, any points, or do we accept them as a true and accurate record? No. We shall take that forward. Thank you very much. Item 3, declaration of interest. Have we received any declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4, public participation. There is no public participation submitted today, but as always, we remind members of the public you are welcome to submit questions to any committee of Dorset Council, and we do welcome your views and opinions at each of our committees. Moving on to item 5, questions from councillors, and again, none have been pre-notified, so we move on to the agenda proper. First item is item 6, which is the joint local transport plan to 26 to 41. And I'm going to ask Councillor John Andrews to introduce before handing over to the officers. Can I also just remind before we do, any members speaking and officers to introduce yourself before speaking for the first time on any item, and then moving on to the second item, the same again.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor John Andrews, Cabinet Member for Place Services until I get my head around my new title. I'm introducing this paper. So this report introduced the emerging or the current joint local transport plan, developed in partnership with neighbouring authorities to establish a long-term strategic vision for transport across our wider area. The joint local transport plan will set out how Dorset Council and its partners intend to support sustainable growth, improve connectivity and address key challenges including congestion, climate change and access to services. It provides a strategic framework for future investment in transport infrastructure and services, aligning with national policy and local priorities. The report outlines the development of the plan to date, including engagement with stakeholders and the public, and highlights the key themes likely to shape the final report. Members are invited to review the approach and provide feedback to help inform the next stage of plan development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews. I'm now going to hand over to Owen Clark to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Owen Clark, and I'm the Strategic and Policy Team Manager within the Transport Planning Team. It's my great pleasure to be here this morning with my colleagues Helen and Oliver to jointly present our new local transport plan for 2026 to 2041. This presentation has been prepared to support the committee to consider the local transport plan, which we've developed jointly with BCP Council, and the accompanying 5-year implementation plan, which covers the period 26 to 2031. The purpose of the briefing is to provide members with a clear, structured overview of why a new local transport plan is required, what the plan is seeking to achieve, and how it has been developed, and how it will be delivered in practice. The LTP is a statutory document under the Transport Act 2000, and its timely adoption is essential to ensure the Council remains compliant with national legislation and guidance. The briefing therefore focuses not only on the strategic ambition of the plan, but also on its robustness, deliverability and alignment with local priorities identified through consultation. Members are invited to consider whether the plan reflects Dorset's communities and needs, and whether it provides a credible framework for future investment. The committee is recommended to endorse the LTP and implementation plan, recognising the risk of not adopting an up-to-date transport strategy beyond 2026. A new LTP is required because the current plan, adopted in 2011, reaches the end of its statutory lifespan in 2026. And under the Transport Act 2000, the Council has a legal duty to prepare, maintain and keep an up-to-date local transport plan. Allowing the existing plan to expire without replacement would create a policy gap, exposing the Council to legal risk and weakening our ability to plan, prioritise and justify transport investment. Beyond the statutory requirement, the transport context has changed significantly since the previous plan was adopted. We face an ageing population, rural accessibility challenges, climate change, and evolving national policy expectations around decarbonisation and public transport. And also, the Council needs to deliver significant extra housing growth, and all of those shape the future requirement for transport. National guidance published by the Department for Transport in 2026 requires that local transport plans adopt a new vision-led, objectives-based approach, moving away from traditional demand-led traffic forecasting. In addition, maintaining an up-to-date and compliant LTP is critical for the Council to secure and retain access to government funding. Many funding streams explicitly require an adopted LTP that aligns with national objectives. Without a new plan in place, Dorset would be at a competitive disadvantage when bidding for future investment and could risk reduced allocations. The new LTP therefore provides both a statutory safeguard and a strategic opportunity. It ensures compliance, responds to contemporary challenges, and establishes a clear, credible framework for investment decisions over the next 15 years. In summary, this new local transport plan is not optional. It's an essential legal compliance and financial resilience, and it ensures that we've got an effective long-term planning across Dorset and the wider BCP area. I'll now hand over to Helen.
Helen Jackson, Principal Transport Planner. The Joint Local Transport Plan is underpinned by a clear long-term vision that describes what travel across Dorset and the BCP area should look like by 2041. The vision states that travel will be transformed through innovative and digital connectivity, creating accessible and inclusive travel choices for residents, workers and visitors. It also emphasises that the transport network should support sustainable economic growth in both urban and rural communities, contribute to decarbonisation targets and protect Dorset's unique natural environment. This vision is deliberately broad, allowing flexibility over a 15-year period, while providing a consistent direction of travel for policy and investment decisions. Importantly, it reflects a shift away from viewing transport purely as a means of moving vehicles, and instead positions transport as a tool to shape places, improve quality of life, and support wider social, economic, and environmental outcomes. The vision aligns with Dorset Council's corporate priorities, including responding to the climate and nature emergency, creating stronger and healthier communities, and supporting sustainable growth. It also reflects the aspirations expressed by residents and stakeholders during engagement and consultation, particularly the desire for better travel choices, safer streets, cleaner air, and improved access to services. By articulating a shared vision with BCP Council, the plan recognises the functional economic geography of the area and the importance of cross-boundary connectivity. Overall, the vision provides a compelling narrative that explains not just what the Council intends to do, but why transport is central to Dorset's future prosperity, well-being, and environmental stewardship. To translate the long-term vision into practical direction, the local transport plan is structured around 6 core objectives that collectively define what success looks like. Each objective addresses a specific set of challenges identified through the evidence base and consultation, while also reinforcing the others. The plan is explicit that these objectives are not ranked or prioritised above one another. Instead, they are intended to be considered holistically when developing and assessing schemes. This approach helps avoid unintended consequences where progress against one objective undermines another. The objectives also provide a transparent framework for decision-making, allowing members, officers, and the public to understand why particular investments are being proposed and how they contribute to the overall strategy. They align with national policy priorities, such as decarbonisation and road safety, while remaining firmly rooted in local needs, including rural connectivity and network maintenance. By setting out clear objectives and associated success measures, the LTP creates a robust foundation for monitoring progress and holding the Council to account over the lifetime of the plan. One of the most significant shifts embodied in the new local transport plan is the move towards a vision-led, place-based approach to transport planning. Historically, transport strategies have often focused on predicting future traffic growth and then providing additional road capacity to accommodate it. National guidance now recognises that this approach can perpetuate car dependency, congestion, and carbon emissions. Instead, the LTP adopts an approach that starts with a clear vision and set of objectives, and then identifies the interventions needed to shape travel behaviour and develop patterns in line with these ambitions. A place-based approach means recognising that Dorset's transport challenges and opportunities vary significantly between urban, rural and coastal areas. Solutions that are appropriate in Weymouth may not be suitable for rural villages or market towns, and the plan allows for this flexibility. It also emphasises integration with spatial planning, ensuring that new development is located and designed in ways that support sustainable travel choices from the outset. By focusing on people and places rather than vehicles alone, the strategy seeks to improve the overall experience of moving around Dorset, whether on foot, by bike, bus, train, car or HGV, or through digital connectivity that reduces the need to travel. This strategic approach provides a more sustainable, adaptable and inclusive framework for transport planning over a long term.
Hello, Oliver Stonehoughton, Transport Planner. So the local transport plan has been developed through a comprehensive and evidence-led process. The preparation began back in 2023 following Cabinet approval, and a wide-ranging evidence base was assembled to understand current and future transport challenges across the area. This evidence included data on travel behaviour, network condition, safety, carbon emissions, health outcomes, economic activity and accessibility. It highlighted issues such as high car dependency, particularly in rural areas, ageing infrastructure, congestion in key corridors, and the disproportionate impact of poor transport on vulnerable groups. Partnership working has been central to this process, reflecting the shared travel to work area and interconnected transport networks of Dorset and BCP. Officers have worked closely with transport operators of Dorset, subnational transport bodies and national agencies to ensure alignment with regional and national strategies. This collaborative approach strengthens the credibility of the plan and improves the Council's ability to secure external funding. By grounding the strategy in robust evidence and partnership input, the local transport plan provides a realistic assessment of what can be achieved and where. Investment will have the greatest impact. It also ensures that the plan is adaptable and capable of responding to new evidence, technological change, and emerging policy over its 15-year lifespan. Public consultation has played a crucial role in shaping the final local transport plan and implementation plan. Formal consultation on the draft document took place over 9 weeks between August and October 2025, using a range of accessible methods, including online and paper surveys, engagement events, and targeted sessions with specific groups. In total, approximately 1,400 valid responses were received, with around 70% from Dorset Council residents and 30% from the BCP area. The results demonstrated strong overall support for the plan's direction, with 72% of Dorset respondents agreeing with the vision and objectives. Public transport, particularly buses, emerged as the dominant priority, alongside concerns about road condition, congestion, safety, and accessibility. Importantly, respondents also emphasised the need for clear delivery plans and realistic funding assumptions. This feedback directly informed changes to the final plan. For example, the emphasis on improving bus service, availability, and accessibility was strengthened. A greater focus was placed on personal safety and highway maintenance, and a clearer narrative on deliverability and funding was included. The consultation process therefore not only provided a democratic mandate for the plan, but also materially improved its quality and responsiveness to local needs. This strengthens the case for adoption and provides reassurance that the plan reflects the priorities of Dorset's communities. The local transport plan is supported by a detailed implementation plan that translates the strategic objectives into a programme of deliverable schemes. The implementation plan is structured into 3 5-year phases, with the first phase covering 2026 to 2031. This first phase focuses on the most mature and deliverable schemes, providing confidence that the strategy can be implemented in practice. The schemes have been prioritised through an appraisal process that assessed their contribution to the local transport plan objectives, deliverability, and funding availability. The implementation plan includes a mix of interventions, including bus service improvements, active travel infrastructure, highway maintenance, safety schemes, and electric vehicle charging. The implementation plan does not constitute a commitment to deliver every scheme. Delivery remains subject to funding, business cases, and statutory approvals. This approach balances clarity with flexibility, allowing the plan to respond to changing circumstances. The implementation plan also aligns with supporting strategies such as the bus service improvement plan and active travel infrastructure plan. ensuring coherence across transport programmes. By clearly setting out what will be delivered in the short term and how longer term schemes will be developed, the implementation plan addresses a key concern raised through consultation and provides a credible pathway from vision to delivery.
Thank you, Oliver. I've now got a few final slides. Delivering the local transport plan will require sustained investment over the 15-year period, and the plan has been developed with a clear understanding of these funding realities. For the first phase of the implementation plan, Dorset Council has been allocated approximately 158 million of consolidated transport funding for the period 2026-27 to 29-30, and that includes both capital and revenue funding. This provides a strong foundation for delivering priority schemes in areas such as highway maintenance, bus services, and active travel. However, the plan is explicit that core funding alone will not be sufficient to deliver all of our ambitions. As a result, the Council will continue to pursue additional funding through competitive bids and seeking developer contributions and working closely with our delivery partners. As Oliver has just said, the implementation plan is designed to be flexible, and the delegated authority proposed will allow for timely updates in responses to changes in national policy, funding availability, and local priorities. This flexibility reduces delivery risk and ensures that the plan remains relevant over its lifetime. By being realistic about funding constraints, while still setting out a clear strategic direction, the LTP seeks to strike a balance between ambition and deliverability, which is essential for maintaining credibility with government, our partners, and with local communities. This slide sets out in more detail the confirmed multi-year transport funding allocation from the Department for Transport. This is part of a new consolidated funding programme, which brings together several funding streams into a single longer-term settlement covering the period 2026 to 2030. The key benefit of this approach is greater certainty and flexibility. Rather than the Council having to bid for multiple short-term funding pots, we now have a clearer baseline allocation of around 158 million across the 4 years. You can see from the table that the largest share is for highways maintenance, reflecting both local need and government priorities. There are also dedicated funding for bus services, active travel, and electric vehicles, including both capital and revenue allocations. And a growing amount of local transport grant provides additional flexibility to support local priorities. You'll note there that there's no revenue funding in the lines for 29-30, and that is because the government have said that that will be confirmed following the next spending review. Overall, this settlement provides a strong and stable foundation for delivering the first phase of the LTP implementation plan. The delivery of our plan is expected to generate a wide range of benefits for Dorset's residents, businesses, and visitors. Economically, better connectivity supports productivity, tourism, and inward investment, particularly in our rural areas, where transport can be a barrier to opportunity. Improved public transport services will enhance accessibility to jobs, education, healthcare, and leisure, reducing social isolation and supporting inclusive growth. Investment in our highways and network resilience will improve journey reliability, reduce disruption, and address long-standing concerns about road and footway conditions. Safety-focused interventions aim to reduce casualties and create environments where people feel confident travelling, including women, children, and more vulnerable users. From an environmental perspective, the plan supports carbon reduction through promoting sustainable travel choices, supporting the transition to zero-emission vehicles, and encouraging development patterns that reduce the need to travel. Finally, health and well-being benefits are also significant. with increased opportunities for walking, wheeling and cycling, contributing to physical activity and improved mental health. So our LTP, it's a clear commitment to how we want to improve travel and connectivity across Dorset over the next 15 years. It moves us away from reacting to problems and instead gives us a clear direction for shaping a better transport system, one that is safer, more reliable and more accessible for everyone. What makes this plan different from previous plans is that it's evidence-led, it's been strongly shaped by our residents and stakeholders, and it's grounded in a realistic and deliverable implementation plan. Importantly, we now have the first multi-year funding settlement, which gives us a strong starting point to deliver real improvements from day one. But perhaps more importantly, this plan gives us a credible framework for securing future investment, the flexibility to respond to changing priorities, and a shared direction for Dorset's transport future. Without this plan, we risk losing all three. This is not just about transport, it's about enabling economic growth, improving quality of life, and ensuring that Dorset remains a place where people can live, work and thrive. For Overview Committee, the key recommendations of our report are to consider the consultation feedback and endorse the amended local transport plan, and recommend its approval by Cabinet and adoption by full council. Endorsing the plan at this stage will help ensure timely adoption, maintain eligibility for government funding, and provide strategic certainty for transport investment beyond 2026. The committee's support is therefore a crucial step in enabling the delivery of a safe, sustainable, and inclusive transport future for Dorset. The report also recommends delegated authority to senior officers in consultation with the Cabinet member to make minor, non-material changes to the plan prior to publication and to update the implementation plan as needed. Thank you for listening. I'll now hand back to the Chair.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive introduction and presentation, which I'm sure members of the committee appreciate greatly. I'm going to invite, first of all, non-committee members to speak. Is there any questions from non-committee members? Councillor Borden.
Thanks, Chairman. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. Thank you for the comprehensive report. It's fantastic. I really like the overarching principles and the responses to both member and public feedback. I've got a bit of a concern, as usual, about West Dorset area, Western Dorset, I think you call it. And there doesn't seem to be, one of the key things I feel is really important is the connectivity with the railway service at both, I know Crewcone's more problematic, I think, but Axminster in particular. And I don't know whether it's possible to add that in. And could you explain, please, what, sorry, I can't see with my glasses on, the lane rental scheme mentioned on page 36? Because I've just had an email this morning. So you're probably aware there's been a recent community bus initiative between Bridport and Lyme Regis for a night bus service on Fridays and Saturdays, which is being extremely popular so far. But unfortunately, we've just discovered from looking at all the planned roadworks along the A35 that it's actually not going to be able to run most of the summer holiday. So I like the idea that we're going to have better joined up thinking with national highways and roadworks. But could you explain the proposed lane rental scheme that you mentioned?
Thank you, Councillor Borden. In terms of connectivity, yes, it's really important for communities in West Dorset that they've got that rail connection at Axminster and that cross-boundary movement into East Devon. That is referenced in the plan at a strategic level. Now, obviously, once we've got a plan in place, we want to move forward with the detail around how we can improve connectivity for our rural communities. On the lane rental scheme, it's recognising that how we manage roadworks has a really significant impact on people's travel, the reliability of travel, particularly for public transport and car journeys. And a lane rental scheme is another option, a policy option of how we can tighten control over those roadworks when they take place, how they take place, and encourage the utility companies to do that in a speedy as possible way.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from non-committee members? No? Okay, if that's the case, we're going to move forward to comments from and debate from the committee. I was notified at the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Simon Gibson, you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Simon Gibson, representing Verwood. Thank you for calling me early, and sorry for having to leave partway through the meeting for another engagement. Although we've sped through it, actually, because I was thinking this is the third or fourth time we've collectively got together to discuss it, and thank you for that. I do feel, in general, that the plan, as it's moved through the process, has got slightly better. I personally welcome what feels to me like a slightly reduced emphasis, which I felt was overbearing at the start of this process on carbon reduction and green travel. Whilst acknowledging it's important, I personally felt, as I know a lot of my colleagues did, that it was overrepresented in the document. And whilst it's a high ambition for this council, I'm not yet convinced that it's quite as high in the priorities of our residents. And I think you can see that because whilst it still scored highly, all of the things scored highly, but it scored least highly of all of the things. So therefore, I think it's right that we've started to try and reflect what we were told during the consultation phase. That doesn't mean that I think things like public transport should be deprioritised. I see that how high that is in the consultation. And I welcome in particular the ambition to increase at least hourly the buses from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you live in a place like Verwood, where most people work in the conurbation in Bournemouth, that really is essential at the minute. It doesn't quite work as many of my residents would like it to. I'd obviously like it to go more than that, but I appreciate that this is a starting ambition, and it is good to see that in there. The only comment in general I have as a Verwood ward councillor is that in the implementation plan, thank you for setting out what it is that you are intending to do early on in the LTP process. There's not a lot in it for my area. There's not a lot in it for anywhere near my area, really, which is a shame. And I accept that there's a scoring matrix that it goes through. I accept that we are working with limited resources. And whilst I would accept endorsing it, as much as anything else, Owen, you made a really good point about what happens if we don't. There's nothing in this for my residents to be pleased about beyond the principles across wider Dorset. So my aim as a ward council will be, as we move through this part of the implementation process and therefore presumably start building the next implementation process, is to try and get a little bit more for my corner of East Dorset, because it feels that if you don't live in the conurbation or you don't live in one of the major towns in the centre and west, it isn't an equitable plan. Which is my only frustration with it. So, in summary, Chair, it's a good plan in terms of priorities. I get slightly more frustrated when it comes into implementation just because of the geographical spread. But otherwise, I think it's getting better, and thank you very much for bringing it to us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, please.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrants Ward, and Shadow Cabinet Member for the Environment and Farming. I welcome this report. I endorse what my fellow councillors just said, that it has definitely got better as we've worked on it. So thank you very much for giving the Overview Committee the chance to contribute to this. That's what we're here for, and it seems to me it's worked well on this occasion. What I'm particularly pleased to see in this report is your acknowledging your shift of focus to your starting point being people and what people do in your communities, not what we've always seen in the past, the best way to get vehicles from A to B with the least amount of interruption to their speedy journey. I first raised that issue in May 2029, when my first month as a Dorset councillor in a group with highways people, and they looked at me as if I was absolutely balmy. So I'm glad that you finally caught up, and it's an excellent way to start making a plan. So there's much in this plan that I like. Where my heart slightly sinks, and this is a very sort of general point that I have to make. So in, for example, Objective C, we say that new developments are located in accessible, well-connected places served by a range of transport options. That's our vision. This vision is just not currently reflected in the real experience of the planning decisions that we are making now. And I have to say, it's not really reflected in the draft local plan either. It's just not what I see happening when I read that there's a massive dissonance between the vision that you outline in this document, which I like, and the reality that we experience. The local plan the draft local plan will continue to propose housing development in quite a number of tier 3 communities, tier 3 villages, which are wholly dependent on car transport. But there's no possibility of doing anything other than travelling about by car. Now, that I am not convinced that we've really taken on board, as a council across the board, what delivering the ambition for carbon reduction and sustainability really means for our local transport plan and for our local plan, because I just don't see that joined up thinking. I just don't see that reflected here for rural communities. So that's my big concern with all of this. It's not that I'm asking you to make a change to this plan. I'm just flagging up that it's just not addressing that really big question. It's like as if you put it in the too difficult pile. And it's a shortcoming that those of us representing rural communities will continue to have to absorb, will continue to have to live with. And if I could, so I just leave that point with you. You can answer it, but I'm not suggesting a change to the plan that addresses that. It's more fundamental than that, in my view. But consequent on this silo approach, or this non-joined up approach, this not addressing the difficult question approach, what I then see here is the approach that I have brought up every single time we discuss this plan, is that you are driven, or you feel that you are driven, to spend your money where you're already, or spend our money where we're already spending money. So to them who have buses, more buses will be given. But to them who have nothing, as the Bible says, so those communities that have no bus service, or virtually no bus service, get nothing from this plan at all. So there are swathes of villages across North and West Dorset that have no public transport at all. And there is nothing in here that addresses that. Now, I'm not for the moment hoping that you will be introducing loads of new bus services, but where is the investment in community transport? The kind of community transport that we used to have 10 years ago when I was first involved with this, 10, 15 years ago, where there were community transport that was subsidised by the county council. seems to be the only possible answer, the only possible way that we're going to join up this ambition to have sustainable communities where we are not dependent on the car. We have to put something in place for those communities to use. And I think it's probably community transport rather than a commercial bus service. And I just don't see that here because I don't say it's not going to mention, of course it has, but I don't see the investment in that I would have liked to have seen. So again, you've done the thing which I know it's driven by the government Green Book. You put your money where you get the biggest bang for your buck. But that just becomes a spiral for the rural communities because they will never get the biggest bang for our buck. Sorry, that was a long comment. Thank you for bearing with me.
Do you want to respond to any of those points?
I won't go into detail about the bus work that we're doing because we are bringing on paper to the next overview committee that sets out the work that we've been doing since January, where Cabinet endorsed a direction of travel for public and community transport. So we will have that opportunity to debate that very point that you're making and how we ensure that our rural communities benefit from improved connectivity and improved public and community transport.
Okay, moving on to the next question from Councillor David Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor David Taylor, Chancellor Mary Ward, and Dorset Councillor as well. It's the overview which have been brilliantly portrayed by Councillor Jefferson there, is the fact of connectivity. I'm speaking to Chair, by the way. To say about the fact of the connectivity of joining it all up, because we as Dorset, our rural community, BCB, is a different community completely. So the fact of transport systems is like different. We have to involve a total transport system to get our residents to move around the county, to go to their jobs, to go to their work, or for pleasure. And I can't see this in here. All I see is an overview of, well, we need the money, we're going to spend it on such and such. So there's no detail, which I'm really looking for, so I can actually pinpoint on there. Secondly, in my question, we're about to embark across Dorset a massive waterworks investment, which is going to dig up probably half the county and get it sorted out for what's coming on. Are we aware in this, in our presentation, for what's coming our way from different utilities digging up our roads and sorting out their systems, which are pretty poor at the minute on that one there? Thirdly, cycleways and byways and this, that and the other, we still haven't connected that up properly. We've still got chunks missing there, and I don't see that in this report for what we're going forward. And quite honestly, I don't think it's enough money for what you need, because we need more. And we, as a rural community, we don't get it. And that's what I've said on that one there. So that's an objective on that one there. I'm going to come back to some others in a moment, but I mean, those three are three things that are really sticking out at me. The final one. We're having a lot of plannings coming in where we're having gravel pits being dug up, extraction used with sand, all this sort of thing with transport for biodigesters, this, that, and the other, across our systems. The traffic is implementally increasing tenfold to Dorset. It's getting massive. Are we aware of this? Because that's the sort of thing that we need in the local plan to make sure we are covering ourselves with transport. Are we working with other organisations as well to make sure we can actually cope with them on our roads and systems as well? So it's kind of a bigger overview. Great documentation, great presentation. I see it, but we need more detail because there's more going to be coming our way. It really is. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'll just try and touch very lightly on some of those points. But yeah, thank you for your comments. I think in terms of obviously the connectivity piece, you know, really key. And that distinction between the urban and rural areas, you know, we've tried to touch on that as much as possible. So we've tried to make sure that the plan is, you know, very place-based in looking at those different areas. And it does, we try to recognise that the transport needs of those different areas are different. But there are situations where there are obviously interactions between those different levels of transport. But it is challenging. Not just between urban and rural, but you know, coastal areas as well, where you've got that geography. There isn't one solution to fit all. We've tried to consider as many as possible, but you obviously mentioned the money and funding that's needed to deliver this. So we know we do have a stronger starting position than we have previously. And the funding that's kind of confirmed through that multi-year funding will help, and kind of having further sight of that funding. But yeah, balancing ambition and prioritising all our residents is a challenge. And as we've kind of laid out within the implementation plan, it is specifically designed to be open and adapting to what's going forward. So yeah, hopefully that comes through.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back on that one there. Yeah, the thing is that it's the practicality, because we've always had the investment programmes come into Dorset and BCP of being equal share and being actually representative of what our county actually needs, because we haven't been balanced in the past, but we know this. So therefore, my eyes will be very careful on the finance to make sure we do get the best, because at the end of the day, we have the biggest road system. We need to service our communities that are isolated and left alone. So therefore, coming on that, but thank you very much. As long as it's been addressed and watched. And did you get my bit about the fact that the increased traffic of the businesses coming on board? And also look at the fact that Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon in Dorset, you can't move. And therefore, there's a future where we need to future-proof it. We're bringing investment, we're bringing housing to the communities and county. Are we ready with our infrastructure to cope with this? That's where we need to be. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, would you want to come back again?
It was just a reference to Appendix 5, sorry, not Appendix 5, Appendix 3, which is our monitoring and evaluation and our sort of key performance indicators. So there's an extensive network of traffic monitors that allow us to look at, volumes of traffic, what types of vehicles make up that traffic, when there are peak times, when there are queues on the network. So that will all form part of our monitoring and evaluation of the overall impact of the local transport plan, amongst other things.
Okay, next question is from Councillor Val Poffrey, who is joining us online.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Val Poffrey, Gillingham Ward. Just really two or three comments. Firstly, I'm happy to support that final minor amendments prior to publication be delegated authority to senior officers. That's very sensible, I think. I think the 6 key objectives are honest and visionary, which is an odd combination, actually. And I sincerely hope that funding from government over the planned period will be forthcoming and more fairly distributed. Picking up what other councillors have said here, of course more needs to be done to support the 46% of Dorset residents who have difficulty accessing services in the rural areas, particularly in the north of our county. I would say that, wouldn't I? But improvements have been made, which are really welcome. All in all, this is a very good piece of work, and I'd like to congratulate Owen and the team for their efforts. I think this is really good. It's been to us a couple of times, as Councillor Jesperson said. I think it's been improved along the way. It's an admirable document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question from Councillor Piers-Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Piers-Brown. I represent the Cranbourne Chase Ward. Excuse me. I just wanted to, start with sort of expressing my disappointment. Last time this project was here, the committee made a recommendation in terms of giving more significance to safety on the network and also reducing journey times. I don't feel that that has been adequately reflected in the new draft. There's very little mention to reducing congestion and decreasing journey times. I think a lot has been sort of made around sort of the rural challenges and therefore the dependency on cars in rural areas. My ward could not be more rural if it tried. Over 75% of journeys in Dorset, that's according to Dorset Council data, are conducted in a car. I imagine that is significantly higher in the villages I represent, of which I represent about 11, and only one of which has a bus service that visits 4 times a day. If you lived in Sixpenny Hanley and went to work in Blandford, you could probably do a 10 till 4 work day because the first bus doesn't get in till 10 minutes to 10 and the last bus leaves at 10 minutes to 5. So I fully endorse the aspiration to extend the public transport offering so that people can use it more for commuting particularly. But I'm disappointed with the lack of ambition to sort of solve our ever-growing congestion crisis on our road network. The government, shall we say, has very strong aspirations for the additional residents and dwellings that it wants us to build. That is only going to increase. Dorset remains the most beautiful county in the country, and that's why in the summertime it is absolutely packed with tourists, something we don't want to necessarily dissuade. They bring jobs for local people. They stimulate our economy. And David Taylor, Councillor David Taylor highlighted earlier that businesses are almost entirely HGV dependent. You cannot shift your widget that you have manufactured in Dorset to the market via train. We need to make sure we're open to business as well. So I'm just not seeing any ambition here to solve the well-known congestion points on our network. You know, the bypass around Dorchester is an absolute disaster at rush hour, in the same way that cutting through town is. Blandford, continues to snarl up even more than probably when I started my working career sort of 15 years ago, it didn't. We never used to have congestion there. And it's only going to become greater, particularly as they're about to build 700 odd houses directly onto that said bypass. We see challenges with the Blandford to Shaftesbury corridor going through Diners Hollow. There's no long-term aspiration to resolve some of the car challenges. There's great stuff in terms of pedestrianisation of a lot of the town centres. I think that's brilliant. That's going to help local business. But I don't think we can get away from the fact that 3/4 of journeys in Dorset are conducted in a car. And that unless we have the magic money tree that we can roll out hundreds of bus services across rural areas, I can't see that changing in the rural parts of our county. And therefore, we need to have a pro-car transport plan to serve that portion of our residents. There's not really a question there. I just want to see, are there any aspirations in terms of congestion and, as I said, I think reducing journey times. So how can we make our roads safer? How can we make sure that people can travel at speed safely and therefore reduce the amount of time that they spend sitting in traffic? Because to me, that is lost human potential, and that is just as bad as accidents.
The car is essential. That is clear, and hopefully, within the plan, there is that balance that we're trying to seek. It's about improving roads, but it's also about improving the alternatives so that people have travel choices and that some of that traffic is reduced by people choosing to use other forms of transport. You mentioned the Dorchester bypass as an example of congestion. there's an ongoing piece of work with National Highways looking at investment in the Dorchester bypass. But that is a strategic road that we don't have authority over. So we work in partnership with them, and we want to try and progress those business cases to a point where they can be taken to government and we can campaign, lobby for that investment in Dorset. So the plan does show some of that ambition, but it's a starting point. So if there are congestion hotspots that are identified then through the lifetime of the plan, then those schemes and packages will be developed and can be added to the implementation plan.
I guess my fear is that the plan is, you know, as politicians we trade in the art of aspiration, don't we? And I guess my concern is that this plan is based on pragmatism necessarily than aspiration. And if we are going to go seek funding from other sources, because we are not a flush council, we know that, I appreciate that, then I would like to see more aspiration for some of those challenges, particularly bearing in mind, as I said, that most of my residents will be commuting, shopping, travelling effectively by car as well. Well, yeah, and we want, you know, while shopping online is definitely, you know, is part of the modern way of doing things. You know, we have great high streets that we want to support, and we want to see thrive. We are very fortunate in northern Dorset to have many great high streets. Blandford, Shaftesbury, Sherborne particularly come to mind. So yeah, I guess that's my observation, is that I do think we want to be aspirational as well as pragmatic.
Jack, have you got some points there to respond with?
Thank you, Chair. Jack Wiltshire, Corporate Director, Highways and Engineering. Thank you, Councillor Brown, some very well made points. Probably just to expand on the points that Mr Clark has made, we're working very closely with National Highways, particularly on the trunk roads, so the A31 and the A35, including parts of Dorchester that you mentioned. National Highways have recently announced their road investment strategy round 3, which across the country is £27 billion worth of investment. You're absolutely right. We're looking to see how we can get that investment into Dorset so that we can make sure the issues with congestion, which are well known with National Highways and we continue to reiterate, can be alleviated. Wider than that, and I think this is a point which has probably been picked up in the points that a number of people have made, it's a 15-year plan. So the level of detail we can go into for year 1 compared to year 15 is obviously quite different. And the investment is across Dorset. So we looked at the figures there. Just in the next 4 years alone, we're looking at over £150 million worth of central government investment. And it's making sure that although in the LTP itself we can't specify each individual scheme, we need to make it clear that that level of investment is going to benefit the whole of Dorset. So the things like our asset management planning, how we're looking at resurfacing our roads, how we're doing our smaller highways improvements, we can't put all of that into a 70-odd page document, but I want to absolutely assure you it's there. And these are things that we build up year on year through asset management plans and project cycles, capital plans, those sorts of things. But come back to that main point with National Highways congestion, absolutely, we're making our point there, and we have got meetings in the short term with National Highways to see how we can get hold of some of that 27 billion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. Next question from Councillor David Northam.
Thank you, Councillor David Northam, Upwey and Broadway Ward in Weymouth. I have submitted some questions, albeit only this morning, but I'll try and summarise. I think this is a very good report. It's very comprehensive. We've had, as has been pointed out, opportunity to comment on the visions and objectives. I'm not going to comment on the vision and objectives because I think they've been shaped well now. What interests me now is some of the details that are appearing in the implementation plan. I think there are some issues, to my mind, about that the plan is a little bit confusing because it covers both BCP and Dorset, and they are very different nature. And I often wonder whether we get a fair whack for Dorset Council. We're a bigger geography, we've got many more roads, we've got a higher incidence of older people, and all that that brings, and so rural isolation is an issue that needs addressing, and I think this plan addresses it insofar as it feels able to. I looked at the money, which I think is in one of the appendices that the government are granting, and I'll just summarise that if I may. So Dorset Council get 158 million from the government and BCP get 89. So it looks like we're getting a better share, but the bulk of that money is eaten up by the highway maintenance programme. 125 million is eaten up by all the roads that we've got in Dorset compared with BCP. And PCP only is spending 35 million on roads. That leaves 22.8 million for Dorset Council to do all the other things apart from highway maintenance. It leaves 50.8 million for BCP to do all those other things. So I wonder, are we actually getting a fair share of this? And that's a question I'd like to ask. And can I come back with a further question, or would you like to get the further questions now, Chair?
I think if you want to ask all your questions, Councillor Northam, and then the officers will respond.
Yeah. Are we actually getting a fair whack? And I've given you the numbers. Linked to the local plan to me is important because these are two of the big things that are happening from a Dorset Council future points. It says in here that there's a reliance that developer contributions will play a part, but it's not clear to me how they play a part because the whole planning process doesn't guarantee funding. So is there over-reliance and proper links to the local plan in this plan? I'm not privy to the local plan emerging. A particular thing that was said in the past was that we actually need to develop larger settlements in Dorset rather than just adding to every little place. If we're developing larger settlements off the highways, which is the obvious place to build them, and I mean big villages, not new towns, is this in the LTP? Is that future view that's going to be expressed in the local plan, expressed also in the LTP? I don't know. Question. That's number 2 question. And then on number 3, it's a very detailed question. There's words in here about annual cluster site analysis. It appears in each of the plans for each of the areas. I've focused on the Central Dorset. In Central Dorset, it's activity number 9 in the short-term plan. I don't know what an annual cluster site analysis is, what it is it new, and what does it result in? Thank you.
Jack, do you want to come in first, Jack, to respond, and then any other points Chris can pick up?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try my best to cover all the points if I can. So let's go for the first one. Are we getting a fair whack compared to BCP? Yes, I like the way you phrased that. To make it clear, the funding we get from Department of Transport, what we've seen there is formula funded. So we don't lose out in any way, shape or form by having a joint LTP with BCP. It's not allocated to Dorset and BCP and we then split it. Where we do have a benefit is that the Department for Transport, who issue the funding, want us to see us being joined up with our neighbours and they want us to have joint local transport plans. It does not impact on the formula funding, that is entirely separate. Are we getting a fair whack on bus travel and bus grants? No, we're not. And that is through the formula funding. And to reuse the language I think that Councillor Jesperson used, the money in some ways goes to those who have and those who have not. Rather than those that have not. So where Dorset really struggles with the bus grant funding is that areas which have got high population density and good commercial bus services which are financially viable tend to get more money from the bus grants. And we are reiterating that point that is fundamentally unfair because Dorset have lost out to a scale factor compared to Cornwall, Devon, Somerset, BCP. And are we getting a fair whack there? No, we are not, but we're making that point very, very clear. Linking into the development side of things, I won't go too far into local plan, but essentially when we're looking at new developments, we're always looking to see what Section 106 and Section 278 type funding agreements can be delivered. So if new development is going to take place, how can that developer or how can that development fund the additional transport infrastructure needed to make it viable? And again, going back to Councillor Jesperson's point, how we make sure that's not entirely about a car, that's making sure that people who want or need to use a car can use a car, but also people who want to use active travel or people who want to use bus services equally have that option. And at the moment, people don't always have that option. So the 15-year plan of this is to enable people to have those options so they can actually have those choices. And the last one on cluster site analysis, I haven't got the line of the document, but cluster site, I'm afraid, is a bit of jargon often used by highways engineers. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's usually used in the terminology of collision sites or accident sites, particularly where we've got killed and seriously injured people. So there are annual assessments of the various, I'm going to have to reiterate, I'm going to say cluster sites, but areas where there are a high number of collisions or incidents, and that's where we look to see how we prioritise our safety funding for the next year to see if we can reduce those areas which have got higher than average amounts of collisions. Thank you.
Councillor Northam, did you kind of come back on any of those points?
Thank you. I think the government funding being formula driven, I recognise. So I'm hoping that not necessarily in this plan, but we as a council will continue to press there for further funding. The element that you talked about, money going where bus services, the way the bus services operate from my point of view is they run bus services where they can make money. And I'm fortunate that I live on Dorchester Road. It's got the number 2 and number 10 bus, the most frequent buses, I think, in Dorset. And people move to the area because the buses are there. I fully recognise that. Hence, we've got a high number of additional homes being built in Weymouth, somewhere around the 3,000 mark in this sort of period. It's quite a considerable number. And therefore, whilst you may say it's money going where it's already exists, it's also going money where the demand is. So that has some sense, would be my counter. I think that in a rural area, we need to support local community initiatives. Councillor Warden mentioned such an initiative, and I think there are other initiatives in terms of car sharing and such like, which we really need to support, because the bus services aren't interested in running buses for very small numbers of people. And I can understand why. There need to be alternatives. There's been a book published called Slow Dorset. I've read that book. It just relates to the experience of living in Dorset, and it is a different experience. And I was concerned at the number of things that were being said about congestion. To me, journey predictability is the essence of making businesses viable. If you can plan to make a journey in a certain time, then that's what's important. And therefore, I plan my journeys around the congestion, which I will have in coming from Weymouth to Dorchester, for example, including the car parking at the final end. So I think we've got to recognise the problems we've got, and I'm very supportive of the general solutions which are offered in this plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Northam. Next to speak is Councillor Richard Crabb.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Richard Crabb, Sherborne West Ward. I'd like to thank the officers for all the work that you've gone to with this report. I think it's a pretty incredible piece of work with all the consultation in there, all the research. There's so much put together with a massive amount of effort. So I'm very pleased to see that, so thank you. I do share the concerns that other people have had, such as bus services to places, particularly on the local plan where new estates are being built. So there is that. Now, what I would like to know is, how do we go forward deciding what is going to be built where in terms of roads? That's one question. Another one is regarding buses. And for where I am in Sherborne, I think I saw the plan for a possible new road to the west of Sherborne. I might be misinterpreting that. But anyway, thank you.
So the LTP, I hope this point was made clearly in the presentation, is a framework. It's just strategic direction. It doesn't set out the details of individual schemes and how they will be taken forward. Those will all still continue to be subject to the processes and the governance that are already in place for the development of those schemes and the agreement of those schemes to get them into our detailed programme. So local members will be consulted as they would on any scheme that's currently under development, and they will have their opportunity, communities will have their opportunity to be consulted and engaged on the development of those schemes.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for that. And I'd just like to reiterate that I support the document.
Okay, next speaker, I've got Councillor David Taylor again.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back, David Taylor, Councillor Taylor from Chancellor St Mary Ward, Northern. Two things which I'd like to be added into this, if you don't mind. And I do support this document. I think it's an excellent piece of work. It's a big piece of work. It's probably the biggest we've ever had. And it's quite remarkable how much we've extracted out of all the information and the consultations. 2 pointers which I'd like to push in on this one there. One is our tourist industry. Where are we on this? Because the fact is we have our Dorset survives on tourism. That's it, at the end of the day. All of our coastal towns, our villages, our towns. Then secondary, we've got to look at the fact of the transport that comes down here, i.e. cars, is in their millions down here. It is vast, absolutely enormous. And then the final one, which I'd like to say, we are the oldest county in the world, apparently. And therefore, our system of transport, is it being catered for the people that come here to retire? And they do. Are they going to be catered for in the future? Because they're going to need the buses and things and not being able to drive. And as I said, we are the oldest county in the country, if not the world. So we've got to really look at the vision forward. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think, Councillor Norman, I will hand over to the officers if there's anything else to add, but I think, it's been set out quite clearly that this is a framework of work. The projects that come off the framework would be up to this committee potentially in the future to monitor the strategy plan going forward, whilst it'll be up to scrutiny to scrutinise what's being done against this policy. So I think, if members have got suggestions for things in their own wards, their own patches, benefit the whole county, then do speak to the officers, speak to the cabinet member. They can then be considered, drafted up, looked at to put on that plan going forward. But no, valid points. Chris, anything to add? Okay, next to speak, Councillor Roland Tarr.
I'm Councillor Roland Tarr. I represent the Winterbourne and Broadwain ward, which is everything between here and Weymouth, basically. My speech was made by Councillors Gibson and Jesperson right at the beginning, and I'd like to take up those 2 points because one thing is the rural problems. I taught at Hardy's for 10 years. The children could not stay for sports, they could not stay to do extra homework, they could not stay to improve their coursework for their A-levels and O-levels or GCSEs or so. And there was a real rural problem there. And like Councillor Gibson, this plan, because it complies with government policy, and that's the problem, does not address rural problems like that. The village of Broadmain has no safe access by alternative transport. I would like to see an alternative transport experiment in a rural area jointly with Active Travel England and Dorset Council. That's how I started my career with Dorset County Council, was doing a joint project on heritage coasts, which brought us the national landscape. You know, we've now got the international recognition as a World Heritage Site, which is bringing in a lot of tourism to the coast. But rural areas also need tourism, and alternative travel is a fantastic way to introduce rural tourism. It earns millions for all our neighbours in Europe, millions of pounds for each county, each area. Mallorca is a good example, where they've laid out a really good network. So people go from this country and from many other countries to Mallorca every year, spend all their holiday money there, which could be being spent in Dorset. We've got the best weather in England, we've got the best landscape in Europe, or in the world actually. There are things there which I think should be considered. The rural emphasis is not being recognised. Rural is all done on numbers. This report, excellent report, we've got excellent engineers, worked with them closely over the last 7 years, do fantastic work, but we're always short of cash to do these rural projects, which I think are vital. Hardly anybody now cycles to Hardy's school. All the junior schools, all the kids are cycling there. They should win a prize for it. There should be a prize for schools that encourage kids to cycle to school, go on their skateboards and so on. Hardy's, hardly anybody. The only way they come to sixth form, because they have to pay transport costs, is by car, which is absurd and going in completely the wrong direction. Councillor Jesperson's point is, I think, very important. I travel widely. I write the guidebooks for the South West Coast Path. I travel widely in South West England. I have not yet seen a single development which complies with any sort of criteria which are outlined in this report. Every time you see the development, they build the houses, they put in a cycleway. It's 200 yards of cycleway on a road with a bit of red tarmac on it. That's it. That they do not comply. The new plans I've seen coming out for Dorset, I haven't seen a single one which complies with any of the aspirations which are noted in this charter. So I think it really is important that our planning plans reflect this. Now I'm wondering, on page 104 of our report here that we've got, there's a sentence saying, to go further and faster, we will need significantly more funding resources, more robust national transport policy framework, enhanced collaboration with partners, businesses and communities. All good aspirations. Could we perhaps have added, I don't know how this would be done, the aspirations which Councillors Gibson and Jesperson expressed at the beginning for where do we go from here? More emphasis on the needs of the rural areas of Britain in regards to tourism and residents, and more emphasis on alternative transport funding from central government.
I'm going to ask Jack Wiltshire to respond to some of those points.
Thank you. So, absolutely, this needs to be balancing how Roland, got your mic? Absolutely, we need to see how the LTP can support better rural accessibility. I think some of the key things that you've said there come down to the funding side of things, and the reality, I think, nationally is that we've had a decade of significant central government underfunding, and the figures we've seen there are actually much better than they've been for 10 years. That level of funding is going to be able to support us much better. It is also being supported by Dorset Council's commitments to effectively match fund those fundings. So we're looking at a higher level of contributing to add to those local transport objectives than we've ever had before. So it is the highest amount of Dorset Council funding going in to support the Department for Transport funding. In terms of the actual specifics of what we need to do within the LTP, we need to look at this more as being a foundation for allowing those aspirations. So that is exactly where we want to take it. We want this to show what the foundations are, and then we will come back saying, these are the individual schemes, these are the individual methods that we'll look to see how we can improve things like rural access and rural mobility. And those are things which will happen over the 15-year plan.
Okay, Councillor Northam, I've got you down to speak again, but I will just ask members, we've been on this item now for an hour. We're getting to the point where we're starting to repeat comments made. So as long as it's something new, Councillor Northam, I'll allow you to speak.
Thank you for that challenge. Still talking as ward member for Upwey and Broadway, but I think the issues apply elsewhere. Bus passes are not universal in Dorset. I'm not sure we can afford for them to be universal, but I do question whether bus passes for older people who are wealthy compared with young people who are poor is the right approach, and I wonder whether we could put something in about looking at appropriate concessions. I've also been troubled with congestion at my primary school where traffic blocks everything up. I've looked and talked to the highway officers. We've talked.
Councillor Northam, I don't want to be talking about individual highway cases. We're talking to the policy.
There is a section in the report which talks about schools and access to schools. That's the bit where I think we should expand to include, not only, it doesn't mention walking buses, it doesn't mention Park and Stride, which are two of the initiatives which are coming forward at the moment to encourage parents not to drive to the school, but to drive to the nearest car park and then get them from the car park in a safe way to the school. These are sort of things which could be included at a relatively low cost. Thank you.
I think your points are noted there, Councillor Northam, but as individual projects that would sit into this. So I'm not going to ask the officers to respond. And again, suggestions like that should be made to the officers or the Cabinet member direct on projects. Is there anyone else? Oh, sorry, Jack is willing to answer some of those points, so I will allow him.
Very briefly, I think that's because largely a lot of those points are picked up within our active travel infrastructure plan, the ATIP. And I think we probably need to share that separately.
Thank you very much. If there's nobody else wishing to speak, we're going to move forward now to the recommendations. I feel that over the last hour, the points we've made, I think we can support the recommendations as printed in the paper. I don't feel there was a need to make any further comment. I think individuals have made comments around individual patches and the need to look at how we're spending money as we develop the strategy going forward. And I feel that those comments have been taken on board with officers, and it's up to us as individual members to speak to the Cabinet holder and officers to make valid cases and see how those can be influenced into the strategy and delivery plan going forward. Because, of course, we'll be giving the delegated authority to those people. Was there anything else, though, anyone else wanted to see, or are we happy to propose the recommendations as printed? Proposed by Councillor Taylor and seconded by Councillor Tarr. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Councillor Andrews, did you want to just say something before we move on to the next item?
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor John Andrews, Cabinet Member of Place Services at Sherborne East Ward. I'd just like to say a very big thank you to the staff and the officers who've been working on these cases since 2023. It's a huge piece of work, and it's very much appreciated the effort and the time and the consultations you all achieved or went to, same as I did, one or two. Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much on behalf of us all.
Yes, I'm sure we all echo those comments here. Thank you to the officers for your attendance this morning. Please feel free to go back to the day job if you don't need to stay for the next item. We don't expect you to stay and sit and listen if you don't need to. So I know a few members at the beginning of the meeting spoke to me around the need to try and finish a little bit early, so I don't propose on taking a break between the two items. So I'm going to move on to item 7, which is the e-scooter mobility rental service. This is going to be introduced by Christopher Whitehouse. But before I do, I'm once again going to ask Councillor John Andrews, who is, just so he knows, whilst he's getting used to it, is the Regeneration, Infrastructure and Growth Cabinet member. So there you go, John.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Andrews. Can't remember what you just said. This report outlines the proposed introduction of e-scooter and micromobility rental service in Dorset, highlighting its potential to support sustainable travel and improve connectivity. Members are asked to review the proposal and provide comments to Cabinet to inform a decision on whether to proceed or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Andrews. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just whilst the screen... Right. So I'm going to try and keep this as brief as I can, but the intention really is to run through this proposal, which is to introduce an e-scooter rental service into parts of Dorset, and this would be in order to take part in a trial that is sanctioned by the Department for Transport. Just so that there is no doubt about what we're talking about, you'll see in the pictures there, e-scooters. They are two-wheeled, electrically powered scooters that are kept on street and available for rent through a charging through an app on a phone. So the proposition is we've been given this opportunity by the DFT to take part in an e-scooter trial. It's one of 18 trials that are being run nationally. And it would be a dockless scheme run on a concession basis. So that would be an external provider that would do that, a commercial provider. They would fully fund this. That's the intention. E-scooters are a good commercial offer for those companies that operate this sort of service. And there are two areas that are proposed. One is the Upton and Corfe Mullen area of Dorset. The other is Weymouth, Portland and Chickerell and Dorchester area. The reason we've chosen those is because we have currently a commercial concession cycle scheme operating in those areas. The Upton and Corfe Mullen area is small. It wouldn't operate, it wouldn't be commercially viable as a standalone scheme, and so the proposal is that Beryl would, who operate the cycle scheme and operate the scheme in the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area, that they would take that on in effect, so extend their current area that runs coterminous, and that would be beneficial to obviously the residents who would use it. That coterminosity is crucial for that. The other area is the Weymouth, Portland, Chickerell and Dorchester area, where we propose we would go out to tender in order to ensure that we got best value for that. How many would actually go for that tender, it's unclear. So why should we consider this as a service? I'm not going to dwell too much on these details, but this does provide a safer managed option. It enables us as a local authority to control the scheme, to have influence over what happens where, and that we can ensure that speed limits are enforced. Something called geofencing, which means that you can control where the scooters will actually work, or you can slow down their speed, so you can restrict where they can be used. It would be a
a highway and cycleway only scheme, people wouldn't be allowed to cycle on footways. It's critical will help cut congestion. We've talked about that in the just previously, that's an issue in many areas. This all helps make a contribution to those sort of things. Improves access for local residents to and connectivity, particularly where bus and public transport services might be limited. And also, we know from operating our bike share scheme that there's a real demand for this particularly during tourist season, so it helps boost the tourism offer. I won't dwell too much on this, but it's just to reinforce what we've been talking about for the last hour or so, that this actually does fit with our vision. It's a scheme that will supports that inclusive travel, the whole environmental agenda, and the need to cut carbon emissions, cross-boundary connectivity, and as I've already alluded to, it will help support economic growth, both through sort of easier access to services, but also and areas, but also supporting the businesses and access to jobs. So as part of this, we've already started collecting stakeholder views, and that is a requirement of the Department for Transport. They were very keen, in order for this scheme to go ahead, that we do that consultation with them, that engagement with them. In the process of doing that, we've talked to disability groups. They've raised concerns, pavement obstruction, vehicles kind of sneaking up on them, particularly sort of blind, partially sighted people have that as a concern. But and also, the trip hazard if they're left out of bays, etc. So there's, they highlighted a number of issues, but both nationally and locally, they do accept that that there are also benefits, and it's important to sort of recognise those. There are people with who may have mobility impairments that doesn't enable them to ride a bike, but they might be able to jump on a scooter, and that's sort of backed up by sort of national evidence. The police as well acknowledge that this will be an extra burden on their on their work, but also recognise the benefits of it. We are so those two, the police and disability groups, were the two groups that specifically DFT wanted us to look at, but we've also had input from the Police and Crime Commissioner, who also had concerns about the resource that it could potentially take in terms of enforcement. And then we've also, wider stakeholder engagement and community transport from community transport partners are supportive in terms of the benefits that it brings, and the potential for that. So there are risks associated with this, but there are also controls that we can put in place. We can go into as much detail as you like with these, but I've mentioned geofencing and other safety controls, such as you must park in a bay, and we can introduce quite severe fines for not parking in bays. We can all schemes must be 17 must be 17 and have a driving license, provisional license or a full license in order to hire one of these scooters. Many companies have sort of facial recognition so that you actually, when you do go on hire, it is the license holder who's actually using the vehicle. So there's a lot of measures that can be put in place to make sure that we've got those controls, and there's also controls that we can put in around where we want this to actually be implemented. So we can restrict parts of towns, we could restrict roads. There's all sorts of tools available for doing this. And it is a proven regulated approach. So it means that you can, because it's managed, because you know where the scooter, who's riding that scooter at that time, it gives a lot of opportunity for enforcement and control. So moving on to my final one, my final slide. Oops, got to catch up. Bear with me. So timescale, obviously, this is dependent on this scheme being approved, but depending on how this, the recommendations of this committee, the next stage in the process is to go to Cabinet. But the key date, if you like, we have been given a deadline of of May 2027 in order for this to be implemented and actually ready on the ground if we are to go ahead. So we are working to quite a tight deadline on this. And I've given some indicators that if we actually did go ahead, then perhaps we could see the scheme in place by this autumn in the Upton Corfe Mullen area, and hopefully by spring, well, it'd have to be by spring 2027, but what's not going to happen is it's not going to happen overnight is the key thing, assuming the decision is to go ahead with it. So that's all I wanted to cover on that, but obviously the report does have a lot more detail and information, and there are a number of appendices as well, which are hopefully helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. Is there any non-committee members wishing to speak? Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Shane Bartlett, Cabinet Member for Planning and Ward Member for Wimbledon-Minster. And I just want to raise something, and my apologies to the Cabinet Member who I've spoken about this with him, and my apologies to the officers. It's just I know something in the recommendations which I think we should add in at this point. If nothing else, it gives a clarity to the public. And I appreciate 2.3 is to examine the proposed delivery model. And I think what's missing underneath that is about the GPS restrictions on it. And I'm speaking from experience in Wimborne when we had a similar scheme to the bike scheme. Because we're very close to Poole, we had the e-scooters arriving in Poole, and they had to be turned off GPS so they could only get to the border bridge, which they were shut down by the bridge then, and people didn't walk the rest of the way. But I think it would be clearer if we actually mention that in the recommendations now, and it would give a more fuller response, and I think it would be beneficial to the public that are looking at the paper. Thank you.
I'm sure we can consider that when we sum up our recommendations. So yeah, thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Any other non-committee members wishing to speak? Okay, we're going to move to...
Sorry, I got my hand up. Councillor Biggs, got my hand up.
Sorry, Richard, I didn't see you on the screen there. Councillor Richard Biggs, please.
Yeah, I'm broadly in favour of this. I know there's a lot of concerns, and many of them I think are covered very well in the report. I know there are evidence in these schemes where they can be hacked relatively easily. I just wonder whether these are using the latest technology to stop being hacked used by people who don't have driving licenses, because clearly in many of the cities they are abused in that respect, and that would be a real worry if people who don't have driving licenses, etc., were using it in ways of sharing photographs online and rigging it so that they can use it. So I'd just like to be satisfied that that's probably my biggest concern, and obviously picking them up and lobbing them up inappropriately would be another concern. But I think broadly, particularly in the tourist economy, which has been mentioned by many people on previously, I think that it's something that's another thing that will be attractive, particularly to younger people to use, if we can get over those sort of fears, really.
Yes, I understand that that use of licenses and people sharing the rides with friends or whatever can be an issue. We can specify in the tender document, certainly for the when we actually go out to tender, we can see what measures and stipulate measures that we would want to see in place in order to ensure that people do have a valid driving license. I know that that Beryl have a functionality within their app that when you go and hire the app, go and hire the bike, sorry, then it does actually ask for checks facial recognition to make sure that you are the person who is registered to that account and that driver. So they're working all the time in order to try and mitigate those issues. There are also, and I note that the police in their report to their response to us actually do have concerns around people who have perhaps been banned from driving, that they shouldn't have access to these, and I believe that is something that we would need to also insist that is built into the into any sort of registration process, and also usage profile when people are actually hiring the scooters.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anybody else online or in the room? Non-committee members? No. Okay, we're going to move to committee. There was a list of hands popping up during the introduction there, so I've got a list already down here. Before I do, just a couple of other points I know we discussed in the chair's briefing. So we mentioned about these areas have currently got the bikes. What is the current compliance rate? I think it's important for the committee to understand this. Current compliance rating with the current bike rental schemes in those areas in relation to proper usage and returning to bays, dumping of the assets, because I know that's something that the committee will be interested in.
So we have really good compliance rates in Dorset. Beryl report around about 95%. It varies, but and it is higher. So and that's encouraged. Users get a £20 fine if they leave out of bay, and then there's no bikes going out of the area. It's important to being left out of the area. Sometimes it may appear that bikes are out and about, but actually they're often being used by people. You can hire a Beryl bike for longer than just your ride. You can hire it for a day. So if people do that, they pop into the shop. That bike's not necessarily abandoned, but it's being used. It's just not being ridden. Might give the impression that bikes are being abandoned more than they are, but there is a good compliance rate.
Thank you very much. And I think the other one, I know the committee are going to be interested in knowing is around the geo-mapping of areas that the items cannot be used. Is there the opportunity for local towns and parishes and ward members to identify areas that they know that these scooters shouldn't be, local shopping precincts? Will there be the opportunity for local members and town and parish councils to influence those geo-mapping areas?
100%. We completely rely on their input, and we will be engaging with all members in the areas affected to get recommendations, but also to talk through what we're actually proposing, so that we get that full input, because it's very important.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to move to the committee, and I apologise to anyone on the committee if I've just asked your question, but I thought it was probably the one that was on everyone's lips for this. So I'm going to move through the list that, as I saw them, hands go up during the debate presentation. So starting with Councillor Tarr, Roland Tarr, please.
Well, I like this scheme. It's an experiment. I like experiments. I think it should go ahead. I don't think we need to really spend hours discussing it at this stage. I think if we've got any queries, we can give Mike a ring about them. I've actually had a request from one parish councillor in Martinstown, which has a direct cycle route link to Hardy's, whether they could have an experimental time to try something like that out, the bikes and the scooters. If we don't approve this scheme, we will get loads of people buying foreign-made scooters which are totally uncompliant, which go much faster than we want them to, and we'll get scared riding along or even driving because they'll shoot out from places at very high speed, and there'll be a lot of misuse. This scheme will control the whole future of this sort of activity in this county, so I think we should, I'd like to propose that we take it to the vote, but if anybody else wants to ask questions, that's great.
I will just go through the list because I know that there is a list here of people that did express, but yeah, when we come to proposal, I will come back to you. Councillor David Taylor.
Absolutely love it. It's absolutely a brilliant scheme. I think it's been well presented, well researched, absolutely infused by it. I am a disabled person. I'm looking forward to it. I want to get on the thing. But in things that, and I'd just like to say I'd like to second the proposal as well because I think it's brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, I've got Councillor Starr, Andrew Starr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also very much in favour of this scheme. My name is Andrew Starr. I'm for Upton and Litchett, so this will be very important to us. It's funny enough that the Beryl scheme was working in Poole some time before it was then extended to Upton. And we used to then get quite a few bikes dumped around. But as soon as Upton came in the scheme, they seem to have disappeared. So I'm not concerned about that at all. But it will be particularly interesting for us because there'll be people who want to, for instance, go into Poole to work or to go to Hamworthy Station. It'd be excellent for them to just use this one-way system. You know, they just leave the bike there. Don't have to worry about buying a bike and then getting stolen at the station, etc. I think it would be a very good thing for us in general. But I think it's also very important that the public come to realise that this is not like the scooters they've seen out on the roads now. This is regulated, the speed regulated, they have to have plates on them, and they must have driving licences. So this is not the same thing as people are getting uptight about scooters at the moment. This is a different thing altogether, much more regulated, much more sensible. Thank you very much.
Next, I've got Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrants Ward. Can't say I love it. I don't think I can ever recall seeing a paper come to council or a report come to council that had so many downsides, so many reservations, so many concerns listed to it. So I'm concerned about the people. This seems to me that it's an advantage for a few people, but the downsides for a great many people seem to be very significant, which leads me to my question, because in your report, in your presentation, you said a lot about the mitigations and the controls, and you said they can do this, there may be this, some companies do this, and so on. That's not answering, that's not giving me reassurance. What I want to know is, at what point are you going to nail down exactly what controls we're going to require from the people who get, because it's one thing to say that these controls exist. I don't think we would be very happy with this unless we are absolutely sure that the controls that you've outlined as possibilities are actually going to be part of this scheme. Because without those controls, I think, you know, I think we're reintroducing something that was quite problematic for quite a number of our residents. So my question is about at what point are you nailing down the controls that we are going to require from this scheme? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good point. So certain of the controls are universal and insisted on by the Department for Transport. So, for example, the scooters are limited to 15 miles an hour. There are some other tools, though, that each of the companies that offer this as a service, and there's only 4 in the UK that currently offer a scooter rental. But they will all have their own USP, their own unique selling point. And different ones will have different tools. So, for example, the one that I talked about with the facial recognition when you hire the scooter, which is a feature that Beryl use, I don't know whether that's available by all of the, whether all of the companies have that. But if that's a feature that we wanted to see, then we can certainly insist on that in the, specification. It's worth mentioning that Beryl do score very highly when the scheme was a preliminary evaluation by DFT. I think Beryl were ranked about, or the BCP scheme was ranked about second, I think, in the country against various criteria. So, that's quite a good benchmark for what we could be aiming at. So that's we would need to refine those requirements through the tender process, and that can be done in consultation with members and get an agreement.
So I think to summarise that, I think it's going to be up to us when we get the tenders to look at what restrictions each operator are offering as part of that evaluation, and make sure we get the right ones to ensure that these do not increase any antisocial behaviour or accidents for any of our vulnerable residents. I think, yeah. Yeah, I've got Councillor Piers-Brown next, and then Councillor Crabb and Councillor Northam.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Piers-Brown, Cranbourne Chase Ward. Couple of high-level comments first. First is, yet again, it's another project and scheme taking place in the south of the county. There's no, talk about sort of other areas. And I do think if we are going to look at a trial, where can this kind of project add value? And it can add value in our market towns, in our rural areas. So I don't know if you would like in a moment to pass comment on maybe why you haven't looked to include that as part of the trial. I must admit, I was a bit surprised by the tone of the conversation. I was expecting it to be a little bit more negative overall, because while when I've used these, when I've been on holiday, absolutely great fan of them, I can equally see that they are going to be a very controversial addition, because some implementations around the country and the continent have been poor. So I just want to make a couple of really sort of strong points. I do think it is absolutely imperative that we require the units to be returned to a designated parking bay and stored, where in cities where that hasn't been the case, they are strewn haphazardly. They make the place look awful. They're a trip hazard. And I'm getting the sense in the paper that is a non-negotiable. I just wanted to ask some sort of technical questions. Is it a legal requirement to operate one of these that you have to have a driving licence? Okay, Because I'm just thinking about, 16-year-olds are required to go to school and college, but we don't provide them school transport. The other question is it a legal requirement that they're not allowed on the pavement, or is that a Dorset Council restriction we'd be imposing?
So the pavement restriction, if we wanted to do that, I mean, yes, they're not allowed, they shouldn't go on the pavement. We would have to make special dispensation for them if we wanted to allow them to go on the pavement. Would you like me to answer your other question about the? So yes, you asked about market towns and the rural offer. Yes, it would be fantastic. However, we know from experience and from where these schemes operate elsewhere that you need economies of scale, you need population in order to make the schemes commercially viable, unless you heavily subsidise. And that has been the experience for us in Dorset, actually, where certainly for the cycle scheme that we ran over in the east, it was deemed to be commercially unviable by Beryl after operating it for 3 years, and they pulled out. So it would be that same scenario. You do need that level of use.
So in terms of, one of my thoughts is that the idea of driving one of those scooters in busy, fast-moving traffic feels incredibly dangerous to me. And I'm just wondering where the balance we can strike between allowing individuals to operate them on a pavement and protecting pedestrians. I think we need to accept the reality is they are going to be predominantly driven on the pavements by users, because that's where they're going to feel most comfortable to operate them. In the same way that we see a good number of push bikes being operated on pavements where technically they're meant to be operated in the carriageway. I think that is something we're going to need to look to address in a reasonable and pragmatic manner. One of my other thoughts is, are we able to have more than one operator within the area so we can drive competition and get the costs down for users? Or are we required as part of the DFT trial to only have one operator?
We could have more than one operator, but I think there has to be a reality check that actually this area that we're talking about is a small area. Compare it to where these schemes operate successfully commercially. They're all in the big cities. So somewhere like London has multiple operators. It's already marginal. We have talked to suppliers, to operators, and they're very much on the fence as to whether they would actually apply for the tender, because it's far away from other schemes that they operate, with the exception of Beryl. But also, I think if there were to be multiple ones, I just don't think that we would get the use. So yes, the competition side of things would be welcomed, but I think there is a practicality there.
And within that tender, are we going to make it so that the contractor has to continue to supply the service until the end of the contracted period? You're speaking very highly of Beryl, but from the areas where they, a few years ago, withdrew service from their bikes, I know they're not particularly thought of fondly. And I'm just going to make sure that if we are going to do a trial, that we actually see the whole length of that period out.
The answer is yes, subject to Department for Transport's decision. So this is a trial that at the moment they're saying is only until 2028. So it wouldn't be long in terms of but the intention and the reason why the DFT are running these trials is to get knowledge to inform legislation that will hopefully allow it to continue. But that's got to go through Parliament and that process. So, and they've already kicked the can down the road several times with this. So, whilst I would like to say yes, it's it is subject to that. But in terms of when we would certainly let the contract, we would every contract has a break clause, and that's what Beryl took advantage of in the East. But we would hope that it would be we would make sure that it was a long enough contract to make it viable. They would want it to be long and viable, and we know that the bike scheme in Weymouth, Portland, Dorchester, is a viable scheme. It's getting a lot of use, and it is proving very popular. So we've got a degree of confidence that adding scooters would actually boost that scheme, and whether it was provided by Beryl or another supplier.
Thank you very much. Next questions from Councillor Richard Crabb, please.
Thank you, Chair. One of my concerns about the scheme is visibility. We've driven through Bristol and we've seen lots of people on scooters, and we wonder whether it's a good idea to get people to wear fluorescent jackets, maybe even have lights on the scooters or bikes. But otherwise, I fully support the scheme. I think it's a great idea that you've put forward. Thank you.
I think that would be a good tender question, is to ask suppliers how they would help improve safety for riders, because I think it's very important. We can't mandate that people wear helmets and wear high-vis stuff, but we can certainly make sure that recommendation is put across to people. But invariably, let's face it, teenagers love to wear black clothes.
Councillor David Northam.
Thank you, Chair. David Northam, Upway and Broadway. I was excited by this when I saw it on the agenda, both in a positive and a negative way. So I sent questions to Chris, who's answered them on the same day. That was the 28th of May. And there are some points which have been already raised, so I won't raise those. But in the concerns, I was interested in, would this be used between Weymouth and Dorchester, which seems like a really good idea? Would it be better on the road or on the dual-use path? So I asked questions relating to that. The answer is, it's to be decided, but at least we know that there's a question, because it's serious. I asked about, would it be allowed on Weymouth Promenade? Because you can cycle on Weymouth Promenade out of season, but not in season. And what I'd like to, all these things are 2BD, and I think it's really positive. Geofencing, it can stop you going into areas. I'm not sure if it can distinguish between riding on the road and riding on the pavement next to the road. I doubt that, but you can tell me later. And the other bit that I was keen that whatever happens, we need to increase public awareness with better signage to other traffic users, because in the areas where they are, we don't want it to be a surprise to people. People should be taking a view that there will be these things and not trying to knock them off the road. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That was silly. But what I mean is, they've got to be aware that this is going to happen, that they're going to be on the road, and potentially they need to take additional care. Thank you.
Yes, just addressing that point of where we would, geofence, that there is discussion to have around that, and we'll definitely be looking at those options. But I'm not sure. Could you?
Sorry. Geofencing, can it distinguish between road and pavement?
So the answer is yes, but if you consider the amount of footways and roadways and the amount of effort that would need to be made, because every time there's a road junction, even in a residential area, you'd have to geocode around that. So I think it's theoretically possible, but whether we would want it or whether it would actually be commercially the right thing to do, and also for the rider experience may not be the right thing to do. But we can take advice from whoever we appoint as the operator, because they'll have a lot more experience about whether how that can really work. I'm not absolutely sure on the sort of pinpoint accuracy of it. What you don't want to have happen is a scooter suddenly stop when you're not expecting it.
And the last question related to improving signage where such schemes exist, because driver awareness is essential.
That's certainly something we could consider. There aren't e-scooter road signs, as far as I'm aware, in the same way that there are cycle warning signs, but perhaps that's something that we could take to DFT and suggest might be something that's necessary.
I'd certainly like to recommend that as one of the things we move forward on. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think I've got anyone else down on my list, so unless I've missed anyone. I have got one more question on this geo-mapping, and obviously we can designate areas, but can you designate days? So if we've got, in some of these areas we're talking about, let's use Weymouth Harbourside, for example, they have a food festival, folk festival, fair in the square. Could you put the geo-mapping on just for certain days to help with event safety, and again, probably linking more into SAG and event organisations to help them maintain safety of the attendees?
Short answer is yes. I know that in some areas they restrict use after 10 o'clock at night, for example, to avoid drunks using it, basically, in town centres. So yes, they can be, these geofencing can be time or location, and speed as well of the vehicles.
That's good. I'd be interested in that information going to our SAG, Safety Advisory Group, so that when they're liaising with event organisers, it can be a consideration during event preparations as well. Right, okay, we've got a few points here. I think, a majority, I think, we're quite happy to go forward with the recommendation for the two trials. A couple of points that have come up for consideration when we go out for tender is the need to review the GPS location, I think coming from Councillor Bartlett. I think there's been a strong support here from members of the committee and those joining us today around the need to ensure that the tender we go with have strong safety measures to support anti-hacking, so people can't falsely use photos and driving licences, and to ensure that they are safe usage to support some of our vulnerable residents that may be sharing the public realm, and the need for the geo-mapping to be liaised with local ward members and town and parish councils and our safety advisory group for events. Was there anything else to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Northam, you're right. And within our response to the DFT, we want to speak to the DFT around warning signage where these schemes are in place to see if there is any best practice or anything they can recommend, if not for them to consider. I'll pass over to Chris, because I know that's something we discussed in the chairs.
That's a DFT requirement, so we would be doing that anyway. The plan is to use the existing bike bays and perhaps add to them, but we'll see.
Okay, so we've got quite a few extra points there to those recommendations. Before we go to a vote, just going to ask the Cabinet member, is there anything else you want to finalise on?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Councillor John Andrews, Sherborne East. I'd just like to thank the officers once again for putting these reports together, because this has been a bit of a graft since, and kind of like mixed with other things that have been going on in their departments, EV charging points, etc., etc. It's been a bit of a hard work to cram in since we decided that if it was available, we'd just as well put our names forward and see if we could get a slot. And we have. We've been successful. So I'm hoping this will go forward to Cabinet and look forward to taking it forward again.
Okay, so we're going to go to look for a proposal then for those recommendations. Councillor Roland Tarr, a seconder, Councillor David Taylor. Move forward now to the vote. All those in favour? That looks unanimous, but just to check. Any against? Any abstentions? No. Perfect. Okay. We move forward to item 8, which is the draft place and resources overview committee work plan. Anthony, anything to add to that?
We had the informal meeting with the PSPO for dogs to help them launch their consultation, and we'll be doing something similar for the ROIP, Rights of Way Improvement Plan. And then I'm going to convene another meeting to get you all together to review our full work programme and look at it in more detail in terms of what we'll do towards the autumn, as we're already relatively full until later this year.
And I think, Anthony, it's probably worth noting here that the committee will be asked our views on possibly moving one of the meetings later on to give some time for 2 of the reports that to go out to consultation. The report authors have asked for some more time to analyse the consultation, make sure everything's right before it comes to us. So Anthony will be in touch with us about a proposed date change, which I've given permission to go forward with. Councillor Northam, you had your hand up on this one.
Thank you. On the first item on the 9th of July, parking review and strategy, we had a working group which was running some while back. It might have been called a task and finish group, but I'm not conscious that the group has finished, and I'm hoping to get confirmation that there'll be a final meeting of that working group ahead of this coming to the Resources and Overview Committee.
Again, I would suggest that you contact the Cabinet member to seek views on that, because I'm sure he can take that back. But I wouldn't have thought that any committee would be saying anything to us until the Cabinet member was happy, and he would obviously been content that the task and finish group or the EAP has finished its work. So I recommend that you talk to Councillor Andrews. Anyone else on our work programme? Thank you very much. That's noted then. Moving on to item 9, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 10, exempt business. There is none. So at 12:13, I close the meeting, and thank you all for your attendance and input. I think we've had a very good meeting. Thank you.